Okay, everyone, let's start. I think the coffee was very interesting, so we are now late by about 10 minutes. We want to take the opportunity to have as much time as possible for the discussions, for the interesting questions. So while we're still waiting for some colleagues to come in, let me introduce our panelist for today's session. Dr. Weguro is the Executive Director of at the African Development Bank, representing the government of Tanzania at the East African constituency. Dr. Weguro has also held the position of an advisor to His Excellency, the President of the United Republic of Tanzania, in matters of regional integration and economic affairs. He has also held several positions in SADC, in the East African community, so clearly the right person to have this conversation with. Let me welcome you, Dr. Weguro, and have your contributions to this very interesting presentation we had this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for the kind words. Indeed, I try to share my views, but also make some comments on the presentation by Professor Sodabu. First, let me thank those who have prepared and coordinated this constructive dialogue, and IDEV, and also for inviting me to be part of this discussion. Well, I represent the government of Tanzania, but also I represent the other 6 countries equally. So it's not that I'm representing only Tanzania at the board. I represent Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Seychelles. And they are all equal. Having said that, now let me turn it to the subject of today. I want to commend again the keynote speaker for an informative, good presentation, because as you heard, the short introduction about my person is that I have been associated with regional integration for many years, over 30 years to be precise. And as a young officer, I worked with others to formulate the vision for regional integration in Southern Africa, starting with the PTA, which later became COMESA, and the SADC, with the double C, which became SADC with the single C, and then later with the East African community, first East African Cooperation, which was revived after the collapse of the first East African community in 1977, and the revival of the current East African community. And then I retired. Suddenly I'm here. So that's the short story. So, but also, Madam, colleagues, I wish also to applaud the bank for making the quest for Africa's integration a priority through its Integrate Africa strategy. The bank will scale up investments in some strategic areas that will see an accelerated, expanded, and deepened integration on the African continent. Let me, before I proceed, state that regionalism in Africa is work in progress. Of course, we are witnessing some shifts in other regional settings in the world. Our traditional friends in the north, I don't know where is north side. Yeah, they are struggling. You see, so instead of us exiting, we are integrating. So I think you know what I mean. So the bank is focused in this respect on integration is really highly commendable. We will witness in the coming few years the bank engaging itself in helping developing regional markets, power markets especially, brokering and coordinating regional infrastructure projects. Of course, the bank is doing that now, but I think it will be accelerated, and further deepened. But also working with the other stakeholders to strengthen regional economic communities. Working with the national authorities to encourage and support regional soft infrastructure development, including cross-border investments, elimination of non-tariff barriers, harmonization of investment in engineering codes, and the standardization of quality assurance and certification standards. These areas of focus should bring synergy and complement initiatives by the regional member countries and other development partners. Of course, for you who have been following regional integration in Africa, it started some years back. It has been over 25 years of effective engagement among and between African countries and the states. And we trace this back to the Lagos Plan of Action for the Development of Africa in 1980, when this idea was first mooted. And the Abuja Treaty of 1991 formally created the REX, which has been now 25 years ago, with the aim of making them building blocks of the African economic community. And the continent has continued to search for the best formula that could see regionalism work and meet the expectations of our people across the continent. Today, we have 8 officially recognized RECs on the continent, recognized by the African Union. Sorry. We have first the Arab Maghreb Union, UMA, which was created in 1989. We have the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, which was created in 1994, replacing the PTA, which he had already mentioned, which had existed since 1981. Then we have the Community of Saharan States, CAN SAD, which was created in 1998. The East African Community, EAC, revived in 1999 after collapsing in 1977. The Economic Community of Central African States, ECAS, which was created in 1983. You have the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, apparently which is the oldest in this regard, created in 1975. Southern African Development Community, I mentioned earlier, SADC, with the single C, which was created in 1980, 1 year before COMESA, PTA, was created. And it was created as a coordination conference. In 1992, transformed into a community. And the last one, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, 1986, succeeding the earlier Intergovernmental Authority on Drought and Development, IDEV with double D. This one is with single D. So all these recs have projects and programs that over the years have made a difference in the lives of many people on the continent. Of course, you can Google and find out what has happened, and I do not intend to go into details on projects and programs because there are many. However, my discussion today will focus mainly on research findings illustrating issues mentioned by the speaker, Professor, which he has argued they undermine regional integration in Africa. I know many more studies have been carried out with varying conclusions, but it is always good to compare notes and generate more discussion on this matter of utmost importance to African development. So quickly, let me go through the few, I think there are 5 research findings. The first one is contradictory / meanings of regional support. This is mainly the development partners problem, as also alluded to by Professor. The issue here is their insistence to impose their own agenda. Africans know what we want, which in most cases do not connect with what our friends want. Africans discuss a lot. In fact, detailed and professional work is always carried out in many cases, and leading to clear and shared meaning of different themes of engagement. This is done, and there's evidence. But if the aim or the objective of the support by our partners, when you talk about regional support, you're talking about foreign support, to be specific, disagrees or differs with the definition from the other side, from our side, definitely you will expect contradictions. So we need more engagement and honesty. I'm not saying contradictions are bad. You differ, discuss, engage. I'm sure if you have shared, you are honest, and you share the vision. And if our partners share a vision and like to support African development, I think there is always room for compromise and agreement. The second one, confusion about ends and means. Okay, partly this is accurate and partly is not. Again, in negotiations and technical work is always carried out to determine what is needed and how to achieve it. And this is also evidenced in many policy papers, strategies, plans, programs. They are there. If you have time, you can always make reference to our RECs headquarters across the continent. The methods and the models used conform normally to acceptable standards, where, for example, policies and the strategies and the plans are prepared through adequate participatory process. Even when consultancies are commissioned, their findings are always scrutinized through formal settings, having committees go through the results and then report accordingly to the decision makers, and eventually shared and owned as, you know, the issues or rather the direction which you're supposed to follow. The other issue is too much focus of outputs at the expense of outcomes and development impact. I find this plausible, and I share the views and arguments advanced by the professor, of course, based on the findings of his research. The main issue here, I think, of course, it is a question of being programmed to respond to political, wishes or political inclinations Now, in a setting where, for example, or in an organization where, you, for example, you have many countries, like I think one of the communities, they have a membership of 20 countries. So definitely it will be a challenge to have consensus. But I think discussions are always held, and even those disagreements are saved, and further discussions are always allowed to take place. So this is true that, therefore, after sometimes agreeing on some areas and leave them some out, we focus, or there has been a tendency to focus on quick gains rather than looking at a long-term impact of what is done or what is promoted as a regional agenda. So this is also due to the fact that we have so many on the long lists, and which in most cases are not fully implemented, or we don't have enough time to implement because of inadequate resources and the strained capacities on the ground, which I share with the arguments also presented by Professor Soderblom. The other issue is exaggeration of states-led and the top-down regionalism at the expense of bottom-up and non-state actors. I agree with this. The bureaucrats have, I can say, including myself, privatized our integration process. In a way, they have captured it. They sit in conferences, boardrooms, meetings, discuss endlessly without involving those who, in fact, on the ground, will be integrating. Those that will need to cross over borders, do business, or, go for training, research, etc., etc. Those are excluded mostly in these discussions. Takes a long time to discuss, but also the actors are left out, the main actors. But this is what you expect, because regionalism is state-led, is owned by states. And the regional economic communities are communities of states, and not NGOs, academia, private sector, media. These are not, although they are always included in the instruments establishing these regional economic communities. They are there, engage civil society, etc., etc. But they don't have the they cannot maneuver. They are like observers most of the time. So that being the case, therefore, you expect the bottom or the top bottom, approach to lead. And it has not been very successful. And these are the arguments that we needed to be looking at. But on the other hand, I think I need now to refer to technology here. 5 minutes, yeah? I'll be through 5 minutes. So we need, therefore, to engage non-state actors who have been left out in order to move faster, because they want normally, things to be done quickly, in order for them to succeed or make, especially those who do business, to make money. This will help, of course, to also equitably, share the benefits of integration. And the last one, the tendency among development agencies and donors in this field to act alone or design funding strategies and regional projects in a way that undermine long-term development. This is partly true. Certainly, of course, as I said earlier, the donors have got their own interests. But, you know, they're the same interests that they promote when dealing with the countries. So regional integration is not a separate entity from national, national level governance structures. They are actually like a collective, a shared entity. So the policies that development partners normally have vis-a-vis member countries are the same, also at regional level. So if we have the difficulties at the national level, you will also find the same difficulties at regional. So what are we saying? What are we supposed to be doing? Let me say it is important that designing and funding of regional integration programs must fully adopt a regional approach, where development priorities are mutually explored and agreed under a collective regional resource mobilization strategy. Second one, regional integration agenda be defined and driven by all actors. Therefore, to ensure success going forward, the participation of non-actors and the private sector should be fully unlocked, given the consensus that private sector-led integration processes are more sustainable. That we need an effective review system using a well-elaborate monitoring and evaluation system that will constantly track the performance of integration and be able to objectively inform the next steps or direction. It will further inform on the various challenges which are being encountered with a view to making adjustments and take actions to achieve development effectiveness. Since the Integrate Africa strategy would be implemented, aided by a well-functioning monitoring and evaluation system, I guess, I am confident that it will be instrumental in achieving the continent's long-term objective of inclusive growth and poverty reduction, as well as ignite appetite for accelerated development. In this regard, monitoring and evaluation will help measure the success or failure of its implementation. As argued by the speaker, I share with him, moving away from measuring outputs and activities to long-term objectives of poverty reduction is critical and should be emphasized to ensure development effectiveness. For us, I think the one bank measurement framework must be fully operationalized by the bank. We have to continue with accelerated speed in harmonization, alignment, and the coordination of policies and implementation at the national, regional, and multilateral levels so as to achieve deeper cooperation across sectors and a better coordination across government authorities, non-state actors, and development partners. I am convinced that the bank's Integrate Africa strategy very soon will be reviewed, and I hope this is very important, I'm mentioning this here, to include other major elements of integration, including movement of people, labor, services, such as telecommunications, banking, insurance, stocks, stock markets, etc., and in some cases, capital, as well as delivering food security. We talked about this morning, I think, during an exchange with Madame Freni. This broader perspective will be more beneficial in generating more jobs for the youth and alleviating poverty. It is disheartening sometimes to witness famine in one country at a time when surplus food is rotting in a neighboring country due to poor market integration, but also lack of connectivity in terms of infrastructure. It is also frustrating to pay twice as much to make a phone call within two countries in the same integration entity. So, Madam, I am concluding. Of course, some services, particularly banking services, which are private sector and technology-led, are integrating much faster than other regional integration agenda. We must make sure this will carry others, but also put more emphasis in the other areas, as I already mentioned. Further, we need to address other cross-cutting issues that impede regional integration and weaken development outcomes, such as fragility, and conflict. These are very important. Africa has integrated with the rest of the world faster than itself through extra than intra-regional trade, driven primarily by commodities, with limited impacts on employment and poverty. Angola, for instance, trades more outside of Africa than its regional grouping in SADC. I conclude. Overall, Madam, dear friends, regional integration is necessary. And to a large extent, countries are reaping the benefits of improved efficiency, economies of scale, and reduced border controls. Of course, more work still needs to be done. We're talking about the African passport. I think some of you know about it. Some regional economic communities have their own passports. I've been using this African passport for many years. I think more work needs to be done in broadening the development scope of the rates, harmonize policies expeditiously, total removal of barriers, especially non-tariff barriers, and ensure a healthy donor coordination. These are some of the issues that if we address them, honestly, discuss with our partners, I think we'll ensure the integration agenda will bring the benefits for which they were established. And I know, as I said earlier on, this is work in progress. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wegoro. What we'll do now is that our second panelist has gone missing in action. He was supposed to have been here, but I think he's been called for another meeting. So let me take 2 minutes from the bank's perspective and just share with our visitors, because I see many new faces, many faces who are from our partners as well, to share a little bit about what we have done, because I think it will answer some of the issues raised by Dr. Frederick and Dr. Wegoro as well. Just to start a little bit, there was a question posed in the presentation, or rather a suggestion, that we should actually have a look at how we can also strengthen national mechanisms in order to promote regional integration. That is clearly very important. The bank has always felt that it is important to promote regional integration because that is the only way we can have the best impact on development. By having the investments that we still do at the country level, we still need to extend that across the regional sort of benefits. And we came to that realization mainly around the issues related to fragility and food security. And we saw in this region particularly, the issues related to conflict and fragility had really been an issue which really not only had an impact in West Africa, but the rest of the region, what we call the spillover or the bad neighborhood effect. So the strategy of the bank has been to really integrate, to make sure that the regional economic communities have a role to play. Now, clearly, the regional economic communities in the history of Africa were established to have a more political role to try to bring those unique or the unifying voice. Clearly, after some time, we started to also request them to have this implementation role which you spoke about. But we've struggled as a bank ourselves, we've struggled to see how regional economic communities can play an implementation role. There are those economic communities who are actually very, very effective, very strong, have the capacity, but there are those who do not. And in terms of implementation, which was clearly an issue in the presentation, implementation suffers. When we talk about investments and talk about where the infrastructure or where the different support needs to be, implementation of these activities suffer drastically if the capacities of the RECs is not there. And so we try to balance that by bringing in external capacity. A little organization there, a little project implementation unit there, and that is what you have been seeing about this growth of different little outlets and outfits around the regional economic community, because we want to make sure our project functions, delivers, and is achieved. So I think there's a whole set of issues around what we believe is the role of the regional economic communities, and how do we support them to play that particular role. I think the other issue is around what kind of support or what kind of focus are we looking at. In our experience, the regional economic communities and the regional integration outcomes seem to work quite smoothly when we talk about hard infrastructure, roads, bridges. You put that bridge there, you put that road there, and you've got the impact that you need in terms of the trade, the mobility of food and products and economic activities. But it's become much more difficult, or it is much more difficult when you talk about education. Standardization of certification across the region, whether it's doctors or engineers or any of the other sciences or even social sciences, it's been very difficult. The ECOWAS has been trying, with our support, to do this certification in this region for quite some time. And it has taken them almost 3 years of dialogue with the ministers to agree that, yes, they want certification of certain disciplines, standardization certification of certain disciplines. So it is actually very difficult, specifically in this region, for example, where you have the Anglophone systems and the Francophone systems. So there are challenges. Health also is the same. I agree with you fully. The need for human capital is extremely important. And this is what we're trying to do in the Jobs for Youth in Africa, but trying to bring in that knowledge, the skills, the private sector as well across the region, to be able to work across the region. And in fact, that was an outcome of our recent West Africa ministerial dialogue. The ministers of West Africa, finance and employment, requested and endorsed by the Prime Minister of this country, said that we should have labor mobility as a criteria for economic union. And this is what we're working on. So I think there are a lot of potentials, but as a concept, regional integration, it is very important, but we still need to look at exactly what we're looking to do in terms of regional integration. We mistake the fact that we put a road there as having achieved regional integration. We mistake the fact that we've put a border post as having achieved regional integration. So I think this dialogue is going to be very important. As Dr. Wegoro said, we're coming up with our own regional integration strategy papers, which try sometimes to define this. But let me stop here very quickly and ask Professor Frederick to respond to a few issues, and then we'd like to open up the floor for questions.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Wegoro and Chair, for all these great comments. And they stimulate discussion, and I think that we are in agreement on several important issues. I started out my presentation saying that regional integration is absolutely necessary. It's important, we need it. Regional cooperation and integration will help to solve Africa's development challenges. It's necessary. However, there is a lot of evidence that the mechanisms, that is, the regional organizations, especially the AU and the REX, they are not performing optimally. There are many problems. There is a problem of implementation, and so on. And we cannot discuss Africa's integration and these organizations without taking into account the funding of these organizations. 90% of the AU is funded from the donor community. My project I mentioned, we are trying to evidence all these flows. We can look at the budgets of the organizations, but they are funded from outside, with very few exceptions. The ECOWAS tax is provides some autonomy and strength, it seems, to ECOWAS headquarters. But SADC, the AU, and so on, they don't have that type of self-funding. So a few countries support from Africa support the Africa Union budget. The rest is from outside. And therefore, it's very important to understand what's happening in the development banks, the funders and the donors. And many of these donors, they say, we don't want to work with the RECs. We are getting away from the RECs. Several of the important donors are saying this. EU has been the most important funder of the RECs. They have doubled their regional spending, but they are saying to us that the complexity with the RECs means that we are looking to other means of distributing our regional spending. And what are they doing? Well, they are avoiding the RECs in a sense, and they are looking into these more flexible mechanisms in networks and programs and committees in various sectors. And that can be good. Several things here are important and interesting, but all things do not come together well, always. We have governance fragmentation. There is, we don't know enough about these issues, what's happening. And one thing we have to take into account here is that we must distinguish between the level of regional integration and development. I like the African Regional Integration Index, and I like that funders and the AfDB has a regional integration strategy. But integration is not the same thing as development. And integration can have negative consequences for some of the participants in the region. I mean, we remember that the first EAC split up because of negative distribution effects, among other things. Of course, we have the Idi Amin issues. But we know that some of the, if we look in Africa, we have the South Africa issue, we have the Kenya issue, we have the Nigeria issues, the regional powers. And integration can have uneven distributional effects. And we have to distinguish this and instead focus more attention to development. I've spoken to some of the lenders and donors saying, we are not dealing with integration, we are dealing with development. And that's a totally different approach. And I think that African Development Bank also needs a bit more attention given to development and poverty reduction in its regional integration operations. Therefore, integration seems to be an end, not an, integration seems to be a means towards the end, right? Thanks for the other comments, and perhaps I save some time for other questions. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Obviously, you can see both of us here trying to, just stay in control and not try to respond immediately. So, but let me, I think that's very interesting, the points you make, because clearly this goes back to the understanding of regional integration and the outputs that you spoke about as versus outcomes. And I think this is an important perspective, because clearly regional integration is not as tangible as national. we have certain national priorities, and when you invest in them, you see the change in the countries, you know that certain outcomes have been achieved, the impact is there. Regional integration needs a lot of work from the different countries, especially when you have countries with different capacities and implementation or sort of even socio-economic profile. So I think clearly that is an area that we need to think about a little bit further if we're going to talk about tangible regional integration. Let me see if there are some comments before I ask Dr. Wegara to also sort of chip in with some ideas. Yes, Mr. Majomo. Yes, the speaker here. Oh, the lady there. Okay, let's take a few questions at a time so we don't have, yeah. So, cool.
Merci. J'ai eu l'opportunité de lire le rapport d'études du professeur Frédéric et je dois dire que sur la base de la méthodologie adoptée, il est difficile de ne pas accorder du crédit à ces résultats. Comme il le dit lui-même, l'intégration régionale en Afrique, à ce jour, n'a pas encore eu de résultats tangibles. Et si on a des résultats, c'est des résultats sans impact. J'ai deux questions et une observation sur l'approche alternative. Il est revenu tout à l'heure sur l'index d'intégration et les rapports avec les domaines de développement. Est-ce qu'il pourrait vraiment développer ça? Peut-être qu'il y a un index, mais qui ne coïncide pas avec des niveaux de développement. Deuxièmement, la question des donateurs qui ont leur propre agenda. Je dois signaler au passage que les donateurs, au niveau des donateurs, on ressent une certaine lassitude et même du pessimisme quant à financer non seulement l'intégration régionale, mais également le développement tout court en Afrique. Mais je voudrais à ce niveau lui demander quel est le value for money pour ces organisations qui financent ces activités, c'est vaste, et spécialement la coopération suédoise. En termes d'alternatives, je pense qu'il y a lieu de changer le fusil d'épaule. Et je voudrais proposer la chose suivante. Si on procédait par cercle concentrique, c'est-à-dire par cluster, et on adopte une attitude intra-régionale, ensuite interrégionale entre les 5 communautés, est-ce que cela pourrait changer quelque chose? Je me dis par exemple, si la Tanzanie a le même niveau de taux de scolarisation que le Burkina ou d'autres États, et que la Tunisie, qui est autour de 99% de taux de scolarisation, est liée avec d'autres États. Donc, sous forme de cluster, on aurait pu avancer rapidement, parce que la stratégie que les bailleurs de fonds adoptent ne sera plus générique, mais va tenir compte de ces spécificités-là pour mieux les accompagner. Puisque nous sommes, et c'est le dernier point, c'est la semaine de l'évaluation, comment pouvons-nous faire le suivi et évaluation des programmes d'intégration régionale? Parce que ça doit demander quelque chose de spécifique, de spécial. J'avais jeté la dernière fois l'idée du mécanisme africain d'évaluation par les pairs, mais je n'ai pas eu de suite, puisqu'il s'agit de mettre en contexte plusieurs pays. Les pays eux-mêmes peuvent le faire. Merci.
Thank you. Here, the microphone. This colleague here. So we have about 10 minutes. Please make your statements brief and to the point. And also introduce yourself so we know who we are. And then the lady at the back, yeah.
Okay. Je me présente d'abord, je suis M. Sangaré Ibrahim, universitaire géopolitique à l'université de Roi Saoud, université à Riyad. Je représente ici une ONG AIPID. Ma question est que j'ai deux préoccupations. Comment pouvons-nous mener l'intégration africaine alors que nous n'avons pas tenu compte des jeux politiques de tous les pays? Par exemple, chaque pays a sa spécificité et a ses potentialités. Pourquoi ne pas baser nos efforts sur la potentialité de chaque pays pour pouvoir faire l'intégration africaine? Ma deuxième préoccupation est que, est-ce réellement les Africains ont besoin ou ils ont besoin de l'intégration africaine? Je m'explique. Par exemple, au niveau de la population, est-ce que les populations veulent réellement l'intégration? Est-ce que les commerçants ivoiriens vont vendre leurs marchandises, par exemple, au Bénin, au Togo, qui préfèrent aller vendre au Bénin, au Togo, qu'aller vendre en Afrique du Sud ou aller vendre en Europe, par exemple? Est-ce que nous avons réellement la volonté politique d'intégrer? Sur le plan politique, est-ce que nos politiciens ont réellement le besoin de l'intégration africaine? Ils expriment vraiment les besoins de l'intégration africaine, puisqu'il n'y a pas de volonté politique à nos yeux. C'est ma question, Gala.
Merci. Konaté Fati, ancien chercheur à l'université Félix Houphouët-Boigny, UFR Sciences économiques et de gestion. Ma préoccupation se situe au niveau de l'harmonisation des normes comptables et financières. Dans mon université, aujourd'hui, pour résoudre un problème de comptabilité, on se trouve souvent à plusieurs solutions suivant les enseignants. Il y a certains enseignants qui en sont encore au Ciscoa et il y a d'autres qui sont au Ciscoada. Donc la transition est déjà mal assurée entre ces deux systèmes, qu'on parle déjà de normes IAS, IFRS. Donc ma préoccupation, je me dis que ce problème, la solution de ce problème se situe à un niveau plus haut, tant étatique qu'institutionnel. Alors, ma question est la suivante. Qu'est-ce que la BAT fait pour le suivi et l'évaluation des normes comptables et financières? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Let me ask the panelists to just maybe provide brief responses, and then we'll take another round of questions. There was a question on the integration index. I think, Professor, you'd like to take that. There was a question on the value for money for donors. Maybe Dr. Waguro, you'd like to speak on that. And then, of course, the political will. You may touch on that as well. I'll come on the accounting standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much for interesting questions and continuing the discussion. There is obviously many aspects to discuss about integrating Africa, of course. The first question about the regional integration index, I think that that can be helpful. It's important to see this type of scores. However, the methodology and the usefulness of an index is widely discussed. And one of the points is that it doesn't really help us to understand the impact of the projects that we are looking at. Like I said, we need a better focus and more focus on development and poverty reduction. The problem is, as some of the commentators said, we are not really sure how to evaluate and understand regional development. So that influences the quality of our evaluations. Like I said earlier, the AfDB designed a big evaluation study about regional integration and then stopped it because of methodological difficulties. And I've read several or many regional evaluations, and in contrast to the cumulative and accumulation of knowledge that we have about evaluation of national projects, there is a huge variety of quality and methodologies how to evaluate these regional operations and projects. And that's a difficulty. And it also implies that donors are shifting their attitude. If donors cannot show value for money, then they will go to other sectors. So we need better integration, and we need to show the results. And I think that RECs are, of course, needed, but all what the RECs do are not always positive. There are negative effects of the RECs. And if we speak about the markets and civil societies, there's a lot of research, and I've been heavily involved in that for 20 years, to see the relationship between what the non-state actors, the private actors and the civil societies, how they integrate into the RECs and relate to the states-led processes in the RECs. And there is a fundamental tension between states-led actors and non-state actors in most of African regions. And we need that to improve, but it's difficult. And what it means is that many donors therefore avoid the RECs and try to integrate private market actors and civil societies in other types of frameworks. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Waguro, did you want to take the question on the value for money?
Madam, you know, this is a broad subject, and I wish I would have brought some evidence on the ground here and illustrate, demonstrate, you know, what is happening on the ground. So I feel it's not, let me just say, it's not correct to argue that you know, you expect civil society organization, NGOs, to bring more change or more value for money than states. We can discuss that. This is not correct. I'm sorry to say that, because we have seen, you know, there are so many issues you need to look at here. You know, the coverage of these so-called civil society organizations, NGOs, and who actually they are working for who, you know. We can also be honest on these matters, but probably today is not the subject for discussion. But let me just give one example, only one example. There's a road connecting Kenya and Tanzania now, from Nairobi to northern Tanzania, to Arusha. I know some of the bank staff have been to that part of my constituency. Before that road was built, of course, there are difficulties in terms of, you know, interaction between Kenya and Tanzania in terms of travel, but also movement of, you know, business. And now, after that road was, you know, was opened, there has been a lot of trade between the two countries, and by implication in the entire East African community. And there are so many other roads being built by support from the African Development Bank, connecting the two countries. So these are projects going on, power interconnectivity, and we have improved power supply, and even improved the the quality of the power itself, you know, fuel losses, etc., through regional projects. So they are there. So I hesitated to really, you know, yeah, well, let me just say, there is value for money for what is going on, not only for donors, but also for the countries themselves. It is as if the countries themselves, they don't want to develop, that they don't care about value for money. They care a lot, big time, I can assure you. So it's not a question of donors. Donors, let us be honest, and I said earlier, that they have their own interests, and I'm sorry, Professor, to say this. Even Sweden, when it gives money, I've engaged with SIDA, Sweden. They tell you what the Swedish government wants, because they have also stake in it. You know, you want to support and see that what you are supporting is actually bearing fruits. So it's a give or take, but also, you know, something which is shared. So I argue and think that it is proper, that's why I talked about engagement, that the donors and the countries in Africa continue to engage and discuss what is good for the continent and what is also will be good for, will have value for money for both donors and the continent. The other point I wanted to talk to just quickly respond to is the political will. On this one, we can also discuss. I mean, it is not correct to advance a point of negativity in terms of commitment by our governments. I mean, I don't think that heads of state will meet somewhere and sign an agreement, and then when they finish signing, they say, we have no will. It is like, I don't know how I should put it. It's like we don't respect these people, trust them, you know, they don't care about their own people, they don't care about their development. They're also spending money, because there's a notion here of thinking these integration processes are funded by donors alone. It's not. When we call meetings to Abuja, or ECOWAS meetings, summits, countries participate, countries pay. In fact, they pay the salaries of their people working in those regional economic communities, and there are many, big time. And we have figures. So it's not that, no, this integration process is funded by donors, there's no political will. It's not. But the issue here, as I said earlier on, is a huge process, and it is work in progress, and that you must recognize there is sovereignty issue. These countries are sovereign states, you know? So you expect, if you want to cede some of your powers to a regional body, you need to discuss, to negotiate, and it's happening all over the world. That's why after negotiations, we have seen some guys calling themselves Brexit, running away from the big pack. They are going somewhere. So regional powers, as mentioned by Professor, they're everywhere, even in Europe. Yeah, you have Germany, you have France, you know. They call the shots. It is real in the whole world. It's not only in Africa. So we want this to be real and realistic in talking about these issues. But it's important for me to mention here that we all value what we are doing, and I can assure you, countries themselves, they want to see there is a value for money, for all what they're doing, and the bank can testify this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ogaro. I'm just mindful of the time, and we don't want to run over into the region of the next session, so I'll take just 2 questions, and I do apologize, we don't have time. So I will invite you to later on interact with the speakers. But let me ask our colleague here, let me see if I can have a gender balance. I am in favor of gender balance.
Yeah, we already do one.
Some kind of balance. So yes, please. Please, go ahead.
Merci, madame. Je suis analyste à la Communauté économique des États de l'Afrique centrale, dont c'est une CR de l'Afrique centrale. Les statuts de la Communauté économique des États de l'Afrique centrale disent qu'il faut d'abord assurer la paix et la sécurité avant de parler de l'intégration économique. Or, comme vous le savez tous, l'Afrique centrale est une poudrière. Tous les États sont en crise. En RCA, ça fait 20 ans. La RDC, vous écoutez les informations. Le Burundi, le Gabon, tous les États sont en crise. Il y a donc eu des initiatives en matière d'évaluation. Quand je suis arrivé à la CAC en 2013, la BAD venait d'accorder un prêt à la CAC pour une étude en matière d'évaluation. Et au bout de cette étude, on devait adopter, oui ou non, la mise en place d'une cellule d'évaluation. Il y a quelques semaines, l'Union européenne nous a envoyé également une commission pour faire à peu près la même étude. Ma première question, pourquoi les deux institutions ne se sont pas mises ensemble pour pouvoir décider si oui ou non il faut mettre en place une cellule d'évaluation? Parce que, et le professeur l'a dit, 80% des programmes sont financés par l'Union européenne avec deux mécanismes. Un mécanisme qu'on appelle Facilité Paix qui passe par l'Union africaine pour l'architecture continentale de paix, et un autre mécanisme qui est les DEV programmes qui sont financés directement depuis la représentation de l'Union européenne. Donc, vous voyez, j'aimerais demander au professeur, quand vous faites l'étude sur le calcul de l'intégration, est-ce que vous tenez compte de ces indicateurs d'insécurité en Afrique centrale? Deuxième question, est-ce qu'au niveau de la BAD et de l'Union européenne, pourquoi il n'y a pas de synergie pour pouvoir décider ensemble de mettre en place des structures de suivi et évaluation? Concernant la volonté politique, je dois vous assurer que depuis que nous sommes là, nous avons quand même réalisé un certain nombre d'évaluations. Mais les recommandations ne peuvent être appliquées parce que nous sommes un secrétariat général simplement. Nous sommes limités au niveau de l'application ou de la mise en œuvre des recommandations, étant donné que c'est la conférence des chefs d'État qui décide et non pas les secrétaires généraux des organisations sous-régionales. Donc le problème de volonté politique se pose avec acuité. C'est la conférence des chefs d'État et elle seule qui décide. Tout le reste, je m'excuse, c'est vraiment beaucoup de littérature. Merci.
Thank you very much. Let me look at, there's a young man here.
Ok, merci madame. Je voudrais d'abord féliciter les professeurs et docteur Ouiguero pour leur intervention. J'ai une préoccupation. Après l'intervention du professeur, je me suis posé la question qui était de savoir comment est-ce qu'on allait arriver à l'intégration africaine en se basant sur des réseaux, sur seulement des réseaux ou encore des projets exécutés par des organismes. Et l'intervention du docteur Ouiguero vraiment m'a réconforté, m'a donné un ouf de soulagement. Parce que pour moi, l'intégration régionale, peut-être, elle peut être mixte en prenant les deux approches. Mais l'approche qui serait basée seulement sur la volonté des donateurs pour, comment dirais-je, impulser l'intégration régionale serait une erreur. Parce que les intérêts ne convergent pas forcément à certains niveaux. Et donc, ma question était de savoir, demander au professeur, je voudrais prendre par exemple, donner un exemple. La première fois où j'ai fait une mission dans la sous-région, dans l'UEMOA, je courais partout chercher un passeport et on m'a dit comme ça que, M. Guilaou, vous n'avez pas besoin d'avoir un passeport. Avec votre carte nationale d'identité, vous pouvez voyager partout dans la CEDEAO. Et aussi, en prenant le projet autoroute Abidjan-Lagos, Je me demandais comme ça, comment est-ce que des organismes, comment on dirait, ou encore des réseaux pouvaient conduire ces genres de projets, ces genres d'initiatives pour aboutir à une intégration si les communautés économiques régionales n'étaient pas impliquées. Donc, c'est ma question que je pose à professeur, c'est de savoir comment est-ce que cela peut se faire sans les communautés économiques régionales, ou encore, je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I'm really mindful of the time, so we'll close the Q&A session here. I'll request the professor to answer this last question, but I forgot to answer the question on the accounting, and maybe I'll also take the opportunity to answer the question on the harmonization between the donors. The bank website, if you go to the bank website, there is a special website or a web page for regional integration. You will find there all the projects that the bank has supported to just give you a concrete idea of what kind of work we do to promote regional integration. But specifically on your question on finance and accounting, we have supported over the last 6 years in phases the UMWA harmonization of payment systems for banks. And we've done that over the 5 or almost 8 years, by region, sub-region by sub-region. And so the idea there is that the banks in this region, when they effect a payment, it is immediately, as is normal, affected on the other side. So this is the harmonization of the payment systems through banks for the UMWA region. So this is just to give you an example, but you'll find more information on the bank's website. On the issue of the harmonization, maybe from the ICAS region, this is to of course we harmonize. Nobody goes, the EU doesn't go by itself to ICAS and ourselves. We do harmonize, we also talk to each other, but I think we depend on the leadership of the economic community itself to tell us. That is an important part of this regional integration development outcomes. And I think it is a mistake to understand that the African Development Bank comes with its own plan. We do propose certain activities, but you are the ones to tell us, no, listen here, the EU is doing this for us, you want to join us, you do this, which we do not have any funding for. So that complementarity is left to you, your leadership, and you're the ones to advise us. We don't come with a prescribed methodology or options for investment. So I'll just leave it there and ask the professor to answer very briefly.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions and this discussion. These are important matters. They're also complex matters, and in my view, I think that the discussion during the last 20 minutes has exaggerated the differences between what I say and Dr. Veguero and some of the other commentators. I am a believer in regional integration, if you want to put it that way. I think we need the RECs. I don't think that the donors should and funders should drive or are totally driving these processes. What I've tried to say is that the donors are important and that they make very important decisions. And if they believe that the RECs have problems with implementation or any other mechanisms that have implementation problems, if they cannot see visible results, then they will go to other mechanisms. And if we once exclude the donors in this, we can see a shift of thinking among some of the African actors as well. They are, it's problematic if we have a deficit of implementation. And that's what I've tried to say.
I think you've covered the major points.
Yeah, so one of the points was also the last one about the networks. I'm not necessarily saying that networks is the solution in contrast to RECs or states-led regional organizations. There is a shift towards these networks by some donors and other actors. I believe that the network approach, which I had in one of my slides, I don't think it's a solution. That's why I said that there are so many problems with the governance and the political dimension of this, that we need to insert and understand the politics and the political aspects of this in order to make the network approach go where we want. And the RECs can play an important facilitating role. And that's where I think that the AfDB seized it. But it's not only a REC-driven approach to integration. There are many other. The RECs play a part in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think we've come to the end of our session. It has been a very, very interesting discussion. Clearly, some more research and IDEV knowledge needs to be applied to where we are on regional integration, what are the conceptual differences, and I think this would be very helpful in the next phase of the bank's own work, but also the understanding around the partners and what we expect, because clearly regional integration is a very important priority for all the governments, for all the partners. But are we making that difference? And I think this conversation helps us, or has helped us, in fact, to identify the weaknesses in the understanding, but also where we need to have better dialogue. So let me leave it there, and I'm sure I can hear some stomachs growling, so I guess the lunch is the next session. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.